Our scripture for this evening will come from Luke chapter 17, verses 11 through 17. Again, Luke chapter 17, verses 11 through 17. If you were to go into your medicine cabinet or wherever you keep your prescriptions, do you find yourself, like most people, having unused prescriptions, even though the instructions from the doctor, the pharmacist, and even on the label says complete this prescription in full? We have a tendency to start to feel better, symptoms subside, and we stop taking our medicine, not recognizing that we still may have an underlying ailment or something that is causing us to be ill, which is why we need to take the full measure as opposed to partially taking the medication. This is a mistake that many people make, and it creates problems later on. Sometimes a problem that is created is that because we did not fully eradicate the initial ailment, it causes a mutation as the ailment, not having been eradicated, adapts to the medication and finds a way to mutate, and then you'll need stronger medicine or more medicine. We are so often guilty of just seeking what we want and getting enough satisfaction that we don't seek more, though more might very well be needed. This is the case in Luke chapter 17. Jesus heals some lepers. They get enough satisfaction that they no longer feel a need to see Jesus. Notice, starting with verse number 11, "And it came to pass, as he went to Jerusalem, that he passed through the midst of Samaria and Galilee. And as he entered into a certain village, there met him 10 men that were lepers, which stood afar off. And they lifted up their voices and said, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. And when he saw them, he said unto them, Go show yourselves unto the priests. And it came to pass that as they went, they were cleansed. And one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, and with a loud voice glorified God, and fell down on his face at his feet, giving him thanks, and he was a Samaritan. And Jesus answered and said, Were there not 10 cleansed? But where are the 9? We can certainly be critical and look at this and have an opinion about the 9 who did not express the same level of joy and appreciation to Jesus. But how often do we find ourselves doing the same things? We show up for prayer service when we have a prayer request, or become faithful to church when there's something pressing in our lives. We find it easy to want some Jesus until things get a little better in our lives. But are we guilty of ever being like the 9 that as soon as our problems subside, we no longer see the need to be in the presence of Jesus? Hopefully none on this call are guilty. However, we might want to consider just the last year and a half or so. Think about when the pandemic first happened. There was a lot of fear and reverence amongst people. People were focused on family, trying to be obedient to God. Offering went up in churches. People's priorities became more spiritual. As the vaccine unveiled, as we were initially getting away from having to wear masks, and the country was quote unquote reopening, we saw so many people like the 9 who got back into this relaxed mode and resorted back to business as usual. Surprise, we're still in a pandemic. God, who is in control, God, who has all power in his hands, is trying to get our attention. And that's why we see these surges and resurges God is demonstrating how humanity is cursed and the consequences of sin, and he wants to make sure he has our attention. What is so ironic in this passage in Luke chapter 17 is verse 16. The person who came back and glorified God was not a Jewish person, it was a Samaritan. It was a person with whom the Jewish people had differences. We could get into the difference in their racial background and ethnicity, but time will not allow that. The important thing to understand as we look at verse 16 is that if there's anyone you did not assume would be willing to give glory to this Jewish leader named Jesus, it would be a Samaritan. Reading John chapter 4 may help you to better understand some of those differences. Where we have to correct ourselves and make sure that we are not guilty of being like the nine is to always recognize the need to give gratitude to God. He has been good to all of us. Even on our worst days, he's sustaining us. We have to always make sure that that gratitude is followed up with a lifestyle that glorifies him. We can never repay him, but certainly living to give him glory is an acceptable and honorable means to express our gratitude. We have to also keep in mind that at some point we're going to need more grace. It's better to stay in the presence of God than to leave his presence and then have to seek him when you need him. These nine who left went about their business, not recognizing that would not be the last time that they would have a problem and be in need of Jesus. We have to also make sure that we're not just simply in this relationship with Jesus for what we get, that we are humble enough to recognize that we need to give him glory, but we need to give to others and serve him beyond our needs, wants, and interests. Let us not be guilty of being like the nine. Let us be like this one stranger, this foreigner, the Samaritan, the least likely of all people, but willing to give thanks, for he recognized where his blessings came from. Don't ever find yourself running to Jesus, running to church, trying to be spiritual, trying to get what you can get, and as soon as your sin symptoms and life consequences subside, that you do like you do with medicine sometimes, and all of a sudden you got enough and don't need more. If you keep on living, you're going to need Jesus again. Why not live in his presence and get a full measure and not just a partial measure? This has been another installment of A Few Minutes with the Minister.